What's up, guys? And today we are going to be ranking all the Spider-Man and Batman movies. So coming in last place is Justice League 2017. This at first was like, it's kind of fun to see the Justice League on the big screen, but when you really think about it, it's a terrible movie. In every change that they made from the Snyder Cut, it just was terrible. And when you see the Snyder Cut and you see what this movie could have been, it is just gross. And especially with all the bad stuff that happened behind the scenes. Next up is Morbius. Now, this is a very memeable movie because of its Morbin time, but actually it's quite a bad movie. I couldn't find almost anything I liked, and the acting was kind of off-putting. The only step we have Batman and Robin. Now, this is the most mocked comic book movie of all time, and a lot of people say it is the worst comic book movie of all time. Now, I don't think this. I find it to be terrible. It doesn't have much good about it. The only good thing about it is when it gets so bad to the point it's funny. But there's like nothing really good. Everything is just a bad decision. It's too campy. Some of the characters were terrible. Bane is probably the worst Batman villain ever. Next up, we got another Batman movie, and it's Batman Returns. Now, I'm not a big fan of this movie. It's just weird. It's too weird. And it takes an issue that Batman 1989 had with only really focusing on the villains of the movie and not Bruce Wayne. Now, with Catwoman, it's a very overrated villain, but it's not a bad villain. And the Penguin, I find to be more gross than anything, because it's just not fun to watch him. Like, the way he walks around with him, eating fish and biting people's noses. It's just a very unpleasant movie to watch. Next up, we have Spider-Man 3. Now, I do like this movie. But now we're getting to the point where I do like these movies. But Spider-Man 3 is a movie that I like for a couple reasons. I think it has Bully Maguire, the best part of the movie. I liked all the Venom stuff before the final battle. And same with Eddie Brock. I thought he was a good character before he actually turned into Venom. And same with the symbiote before it bonded with Eddie Brock. Sandman is an alright villain. He should have been the main villain. The way that they executed Harry's arc was bad. And it kind of felt like a bit of a rehash of the first two movies. Next up is Venom. Now, I do like this movie quite a bit. Every time I watch it, I like it a little bit more. Watch it, you tend to forget about the first 45 minutes, which is quite problematic, on how Eddie Brock can get to Venom. But once they're bonded and they start talking, it becomes a great, fun movie. But in my opinion, the movie didn't even need a final battle, because it just felt a bit tacked on at the end, and Eddie and the fake out Eddie and Venom deaths were. Next up is Batman Forever. Now, this is kind of like Batman and Robin, but it takes the campiness and makes it kind of good. And especially with Jim Carrey in the role, there's not much to say about the movie. It has way too much plot lines, but overall, it's kind of a good movie. Next up is Batman versus Superman. Now, if you've ever seen my old Batman rankings, you'd see that I had this one straight at the bottom. I hated this movie when I first watched it. But I took a rewatch and I noticed it's ambitious and flawed. It's not a bad movie at all. I love Bruce's arc throughout the movie, and I like how they kind of deconstructed the heroes a bit. I liked that. And I like the whole aspect of Batman versus Superman. But the whole part about the death of Superman, setting up the Justice League, that's probably what ruined it from being way higher on this list. Next up is Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, I really like this movie. It's a great Spider-Man movie. It's a bit overhated in my opinion. Mysterio is a great villain. Although my only problem with the movie is that Mysterio, even though he is a great villain, he is a bit flawed. The whole, what is he going to do after the world thinks of him as the greatest superhero? When there's actual threats that need stopping, what is he gonna do? So I found his point to be a bit pointless. Next up is Justice League Snyder Cut. Now, a ton of people either love this movie or they hate it. Now, I'm one of the people that is a bit in the middle. I think it is a good movie. I really like it, but in my opinion, it's overly long. And the first half of it, I literally, almost fell asleep. It's boring. Except the second half. The second half is, epic and it's awesome. But it's very boring. And the character arcs they gave to all the characters was great. Especially the standouts were Flash and Cyborg. They had the best character arcs. Next up is The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, I really like this movie. It's a great movie, in my opinion. I really liked the bit of a darker tone of Spider-Man. The chemistry between Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and Gwen was amazing. There were a lot of great things about this movie, but the reason it's not higher is because they shouldn't have tacked on the plotline about the lizard turning the whole city into lizards, because that's just a bit too... They went from a dark film to kind of a goofy film in idea. They didn't actually execute it in a goofy way, but the idea of turning the whole city to lizards was quite a bad idea. Next up is Batman 1989. Good movie, although I do have some problems with it, again, with my problem with Batman Returns. Bruce is not the main character. It's the Joker. And the Joker is a fabulous character, but he's not a main character. He is a great villain, but he's not supposed to be a main character, which is kind of the movie's problem. Next up is Venom Let There Be Carnage. Now, when I saw this for the first time, I was amazed. This movie was awesome. But the more I really think about it, it hasn't aged quite well with me. Because it does get a little too goofy, and some of it is just outright stupid. But some of it I really like, especially the relationship between Eddie and Venom. And I also really like Carnage as a villain. I thought that was the best part about the movie, was Carnage. And Woody Harrelson gave an amazing performance at that role. Next up, we got Spider-Man Homecoming, the first Tom Holland Spider-Man movie. Now, I really like this movie. I really like the high school vibes. The Vulture is a great villain. I like Peter's arc throughout the movie a lot, and it's very entertaining with all the side characters and stuff, but the reason it's not higher on the list is because you have a ton of, classic comic villains in this movie that are wasted. And also, it's really good. It has not much bad about it, but it doesn't have much good about it. Next up is Batman Begins. Now, I love this movie. This is one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. This is a great origin story. That's the best part about the movie, is the origin of Bruce Wayne coming into Batman. And it's really good. That's probably the best part about it. My only problem with it is that it feels like two different movies. The beginning and the final act of the movie and the middle act. Because you go from, beginning act with Ra's al Ghul to the middle act, which is a crime story, and then the final act, which is Ra's al Ghul again. So that's my only nitpick about the movie. Next up, we have The Dark Knight Rises, the conclusion to Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. Now, I love this movie. I like mostly everything about it, but it has a bit too much lapses in logic, on how 1 minute Bruce is in this cave, in the next minute, he's in Gotham. It's only in the span of 10 minutes. But in my opinion, the best part about the movie was Bruce's arc. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie was when he finally climbed up that wall. That scene was amazing. Bane is an awesome villain. This whole movie is awesome. But I do have one little complaint about it, is that the Talia al Ghul twist was terrible. It undermined Bane. Next up is the newest movie released on this list, The Batman. Now, this is a great Batman movie. I love almost everything about it. The detective aspect, all the characters landed. They were all really good. Although I thought Alfred was a bit underused in the movie, and so was the character of Bruce Wayne. But that was kind of the point. But since the sequel is coming, I feel like they'll touch more on that in the next movie. But in my opinion, the real standout here was Colin Farrell's Penguin. He was so funny and entertaining. Next up is Spider-Man 2002. Now, I really like this movie. I like almost everything about it. The whole origin aspect was great. Green Goblin, a great villain. So I really enjoyed this movie quite a bit. I don't have much to complain about it. I just don't like it as much as the stuff higher up on this list. Next up is Spider-Man 2. The best Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie, in my opinion, is really, really good. The whole... I literally have no problems with this movie. Just in my opinion, the highs aren't the highest that they could be. But I have no problems with this movie. Doc Ock's a great villain. It's just a really good movie. Next up is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. We got a lot of Spider-Man movies in a row. But Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, in my opinion, is great. It is a good movie for people that are kids and for people that are like adults. It is... Every joke lands. They took a really weird concept and turned it really good. Miles' origin story throughout this movie is really good. And in my opinion, the best part about this movie was the character arc with Peter B. Parker. Next up might be my most controversial movie opinion of all time. Amazing Spider-Man 2. I love this movie. It was a huge part of my childhood. I don't actually find much that's bad about the movie. I love like almost everything about it. The whole relationship concept, the Spider-Man concept. Heck, I even like the villains, except Paul Giamatti's Rhino. He sucked. But my only real complaint is that the Green Goblin part at the end felt a little bit rushed. But surprisingly, I actually did like Electro quite a bit in this movie. He served his purpose, being really campy. And the best part about the movie was Peter's effect on Gwen's death in that ending scene where he's been not Spider-Man for months and the city is in trouble and all seems lost and he just steps in to take the hero role. And in second place is Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, a while back, I would have put this in first place, but it hasn't aged the best with me. The whole nostalgia aspect landed perfectly. I love seeing Toby and Andrew back, all the villains back, all the interactions in the movie, all the character arcs were fabulous. But the best part about the movie was Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man catching MJ in that scene, which was amazing because of the impact it had on him. And I just find some of the jokes in this movie seem a bit cringy. And also the soundtrack in this movie, I wish we got more of the soundtrack from the other movies. But that's just my complaints with it. Coming in first place is The Dark Knight. Now, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. It is like nothing I can find bad about the movie. And unlike some of the other movies on this list, the highs are really high. It's a really good movie. Two-Face and Joker are awesome. They're some of my favorite comic book movie villains of all time. And overall, this is just a really good movie. And it's definitely one of my top 10 favorites. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe and turn on notifications. And also, comment what your ranking is.